Section 12 of The Pastor's Wife by Elizabeth von Arnim. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 12. No, England was not for her. Her place was in Kökensee, and her business now was to do what her governesses used to call improve her mind. Perhaps, if she improved it enough, Robert would talk to her again sometimes. And this time not on the little treasure basis, but on the solid one of intellectual companionship. Might she not end by being a real helpmate to him? Somebody who would gradually learn to be quiet and analytical and artful with grains. She went indoors and wrote then and there to London, renewing the long-ended subscriptions to the Times, Spectator, Clarion, Hibbert's Journal, and the rest. She asked for a catalogue of the newest publications that were not novels. Her determination was too serious just then for novels. Ordered Herbert Spencer's First Principles, for she felt she would like to have some principles, especially first ones, and said she would be glad of any little hint the news agent could give her as to what he thought a married lady ought to know. And she spent the rest of the evening and the 2 following days laying the foundations of intellectual companionship by looking up the article Manure in the Encyclopaedia Britannica and paraphrasing it into conversational observations that sounded to her so clever when she tried them on Herr Dremmel 3 days later at tea-time that she was astonished herself. She was still more astonished when Herr Dremmel, having listened, remarked that her facts were wrong. "But they can't possibly," she began, then broke off, feeling the awkwardness of a position in which one was unable to argue without at once revealing the encyclopedia. Chapter 27. This was in May. By the end of the following May, Ingeborg had read so much that she felt quite uncomfortable. It had been a fine confused reading, in which Ruskin jostled Mr. Roger Fry, and Shelley lingered, as it were, in the lap of Mr. Masefield. The news agent, who must have lived chiefly a great many years before, steadily sent her mid, early, and pre-Victorian literature, and she, ordering on her own account books advertised in the weekly papers, found herself as a result one day in the placid arms of the lake poets, and the next being disciplined by Mr. Marinetti, one day ambling unconcernedly with Lamb, and the next caught in the exquisite intricacies of Mr. Henry James. She read books of travel, she learned poetry by heart, she grew skilful at combining her studies with her cooking, and propping up Keats on the dresser, could run to him for a fresh line in the very middle of the pudding, almost without the pudding minding. And since she loved to hear the beautiful words she learned aloud, and the kitchen was full of a pleasant buzzing, a murmurous sound of sonnets as well as flies, to which the servant got used in time. But though she set about this new life with solemnity, for was she not a lopped and lonely woman whose husband had left off loving her, and whose children had been taken away, cheerfulness kept on creeping in. The chief obstacle to any sort of continued gloom was that there was a morning in every day. Also she had enthusiasms, those most uplifting and outlifting from oneself of spiritual attitudes, and developed a pretty talent for tingling. She would tingle on the least provocation, with joy over a poem, with admiration over the description of a picture, and thrilled and quivered with response to tales of beauty, of the beauty of the cathedrals in France, miracles of coloured glass held together delicately by stone, blown together, She could only think from the descriptions, in their exquisite fragility by the breath of God rather than built up slowly by men's hands, of the beauty of places, the lagoons round Venice at sunrise, the desert toward evening, of the beauty of love, faithful, splendid, equal love, of all the beauty men made with their hands, little spuddy things running over dead stuff, blocks of stone, bits of glass and canvas, fashioning and fashioning till at last there was the vision, pulled out of her brain and caught forever into the glory of line and colour. She longed to talk about the wonderful and stirring and vivid things life outside Kökensee seemed to flash with. What must it be like to talk to people who knew and had seen? What could it be like to see for oneself, to travel, to go to France and its cathedrals, to go to Italy in the springtime when the jewels of the world could be looked at in a setting of clear skies and generous flowers, or in autumn when Kökensee was grey and tortured with rainstorms, to go away there into serenity, to where the sun burned the chestnuts golden all day long, and the air smelt of ripened grapes, and she had only seen the Rigi. Well, that was something, and it seemed somehow appropriate for a pastor's wife. She turned again to her books. What she had was very good, and she had found an old woman in the village who did not mind being comforted, so that added to everything else was now the joy of gratitude. It seemed indeed that she was to have a run of joys that spring, for besides these came suddenly yet another, the joy so long dreamed of having some one to talk to. And such a some one, thought Ingeborg, entirely dazzled by her good fortune, for it was Ingram. She was paddling the punt as usual down the lake one afternoon, a pile of books at her feet, when, passing the end of the arm of the reeds that stretched out round her hidden bay, she perceived that her little beach was not empty, and pausing, astonished, with her paddle arrested in the air to look, she recognized in the middle of a confusion of objects strewn round him that no doubt had to do with painting, sitting with his elbows on his drawn-up knees and his chin in his hand, Ingram. He was doing nothing, just staring. She came from behind the arm of reeds, half drifting along noiselessly out towards the middle of the lake, straight across his line of sight. For an instant he stared motionless, while she, holding her paddle out of the water, stared equally motionless at him. Then he seized his sketching book and began furiously to draw. She was out in the sun and had no hat on. Her hair was the strangest colour against the background of water and sky, more like a larch in autumn than anything he could think of. She seemed the vividest thing, suddenly cleaving the pallors and uncertainties of reeds and water and flecked northern sky. "Don't move," he shouted, in what he supposed was German, sketching violently. "So it's you," she called back in English, and her voice sang. "Yes, it's me all right," he said, his pencil flying. He did not recognize her. He had seen too many people in 7 years to keep the foggy figure of that distant November evening in his mind. "I'm coming in," she called, digging her paddle into the water. "Sit still," he shouted. "But I want to talk. Sit still." She sat still, watching him, unable to believe her good fortune. If he were only here again for a single day, and she could only talk to him for a single hour, what a refreshment, what a delight. To talk in English, to talk to someone who had painted Judith, to talk to someone so wonderful, to talk at all. She was as little shy as a person stranded on a desert island would be of anybody, kings included, who should appear after years on the solitary beach. "Well?" she called, after sitting patiently for what she felt must be half an hour, but which was 5 minutes. He did not answer, absorbed in what he was doing. She waited for what seemed another half an hour, and then turned the punt in the direction of the shore. "I'm coming in," she called, and as he did not answer she paddled towards the bay. He stared at her, his head a little on one side, as she came close. "What are you going to do?" he asked, seeing she was manoeuvring the punt into the corner under the oak tree. "Land," said Ingeborg. He got up and caught hold of the chain fastened to the punt's nose and dragged it up to the beach. "How do you do?" she said, jumping out and holding out her hand. "Mr. Ingram," she added, looking up at him, her face quite solemn with pleasure. "Well now, but who on earth are you?" he asked, shaking her hand and staring. Her clothes, now that she was standing up, were the oddest things, recalling back numbers of Punch. "You're not staying at the Glambecks', and except for the Glambecks there isn't anywhere to stay." "But I told you I was the pastor's wife." "You did? Last time. Well, and I still am. But when was last time? Don't you remember? You were staying with the Glambecks then, too." "But I haven't stayed with the Glambecks for an eternity. At least 10 years." "7," said Ingeborg. 7.5. It was in November." "But you must have been in pinafores. And you walked down the avenue with me. Don't you remember?" "No," said Ingram, staring at her. "And you scolded me because I couldn't walk as fast as you did. Don't you remember?" "No," said Ingram. "And you said I'd run to seed if I wasn't careful. Don't you remember?" "No," said Ingram. "And I had on my greatcoat and skirt. Don't you remember?" "No, no, no," said Ingram, smiting his forehead. "And I don't believe a word of it. You're just making it up. Look here," he said, clearing away his things to make room for her. "Sit down and let us talk. Are you real?" "Yes, and I live in Kökensee." "Just round the corner, behind the reeds." "But I told you that before," said Ingeborg. "You do live?" he said, pushing his things aside. "You're not just a flame-headed little dream that will presently disappear again." "My name's Dremmel, Frau Dremmel. But I told you that before, too." "The things a man forgets," he exclaimed, spreading a silk handkerchief over the coarse grass. "There, sit on that." "You're laughing at me," she said, sitting down, "and I don't mind a bit. I'm much too glad to see you." "If I laugh, it's with pleasure," he said, staring at the effect of her against the pale green of the reeds. Where had he seen just that before? That Scandinavian colouring, that burning sort of brightness in the hair. "It's so amusing of you to be Frau anything." She smiled at him with the frankness of a pleased boy. "You're very nice, you know," he said, smiling back. "You didn't think so last time. You called me your dear lady and asked me if I never read." "Well, and didn't you?" he said, sitting down too, but a little way off so that he could get her effect better. "Yes, do sit down. Then I shan't be so dreadfully afraid you're going." "Why, but I've only just found you." "But last time you disappeared almost at once into the fog, and you'd only just found me then," she said, her hands clasped round her knees, her face the face of the entirely happy. "After all, I seem to have made some progress in 7 years," he said. "I apparently couldn't see then." "No, it was me. I was very invisible." "Invisible?" "Oh, moth-eaten, dilapidated, dun-coloured, and I'd been crying." "You? Look here, nobody with your kind of colouring should ever cry. It's a sin. It would be most distressing, seriously, if you were ever less white than you are at this moment." "See how nice it is not to be a painter," said Ingeborg. "I don't mind a bit if you're white or not so long as it's you." "But why should you like it to be me?" asked Ingram, to whom flattery, used as he was to it, was very pleasant, and feeling the comfort of the cat who is being gently tickled behind the ear. "Because," said Ingeborg earnestly, "you're somebody wonderful." "Oh, but you'll make me purr," he said. "And I see your name in the papers at least once a week," she said. "Oh, the glory!" "And Berlin's got 2 of your pictures, bought for the nation." "Yes, it has, and haggled till it got them a dead bargain." "And you've painted my sister." "What?" he said quickly, staring at her again. "Why, of course. That's it. That's who you remind me of. The amazing Judith." "Are you such friends?" she asked, surprised. "Oh, well, then, the wife of the Master of Ananias. Let us give her her honours. She's the most entirely beautiful woman I've seen. But what?" "Oh, well, I did a very good portrait of her. The old boy didn't like it." "What old boy?" "The Master. He tried to stop my showing it. And so did the other old boy." "What other old boy?" "The Bishop." "But if it was so good?" "It was exact. It was the living woman. It was a portrait of sheer exquisite flesh." "Well, then," said Ingeborg. "Oh, but you know bishops." He shrugged his shoulders. "Italy's got it now. It's at Venice. The State bought it. You must go and see it next time you're there." "I will," she laughed, "the very next time." And her laugh was the laugh of joyful amusement itself. Ingram was now 43 or 4, and leaner than ever. His high shoulders were narrow, his thin neck came a long way out of his collar at the back, and was partly hidden in front by his short red beard. His hair, darker than his beard, was plastered down neatly. He had very light, piercing eyes, and a nose that Ingeborg liked. She liked everything. She liked his tweed clothes and his big thin hands, the wonderful hands that did the wonderful pictures, and his long, thin, nimble legs. She liked the way he fidgeted, and the quickness of his movements, and she glowed with pride to think she was sitting with a man who was mentioned in the papers at least once a week, and whose pictures were bought by states, and she glowed with happiness because he did not this time seem anxious to go back to the Glambecks at once. But most of all she glowed with the heavenliness, the absolute heavenliness of being talked to. "And you're her sister," he said, staring at her. "Now that really is astonishing." "But everybody can't be beautiful." "A sister of hers here, tucked away in this desert. It is a desert, you know. I've come to it because I wanted a desert. One does sometimes after too much of the opposite. But I go away again, and you live in it. What have you been doing all these years since I was here last?" "Oh, I've been busy." "But not here, not all the time here." "Yes, all of it." "What, not away at all?" "I went to Zoppot once." "Zoppot? Where's Zoppot? I never heard of Zoppot." "I don't believe Zoppot's any good." "Do you mean to say you've not been to a town, to a place where people say things and hear things and rub themselves alive against each other since last I was here?" "Well, but pastors' wives don't rub." "But it's incredible. It's like death." "Why didn't you?" "Because I couldn't." "As though it weren't possible to tear oneself free at least every now and then." "You wait till you're a pastor's wife." "But how do you manage to be so alive?" "For you shine, you know." When I think of all the things I've done since I was here last." He broke off and looked away from her across the lake. "Oh, well, sickening things really, most of them," he finished. "Wonderful pictures," said Ingeborg, leaning forward and flushing with her enthusiasm. "That's what you've done." "Yes, one paints and paints, but in between it's those in between the work fits that hash one up. What do you do in between?" "In between what?" "Whatever it is you do in the morning and whatever it is you do in the evening." "I enjoy myself." Yes, that's what I'd like to do." "But don't you?" "I can't." "What? You can't?" she said. "But you live in beauty. You make it. You pour it over the world." She stopped abruptly, hit by a sudden thought. "I beg your pardon," she said. "I don't know anything really. Perhaps you're in mourning?" He looked at her. "No," he said, "I'm not in mourning." "Or perhaps no, you're not ill. And you can't be poor. Well, then, why in the world don't you enjoy yourself?" "Aren't you ever bored?" he answered. "The days aren't long enough." He looked round at the empty landscape and shuddered. "Here, in Kökensee," he said, "it's spring now, but what about the wet days, the howling days? What about unmanageable months like February? Why," he turned to her, "you must be a perfect little seething vessel of independent happiness, bubbling over with just your own contentments." "I never was called a seething vessel before," said Ingeborg, hugging her knees, her eyes dancing. "What an impression for a respectable woman to produce." "What a gift to possess, you mean. The greatest of all, to carry one's happiness about with one." "But that's exactly what you do. Aren't you spilling joy at every step, splashing it into all the galleries of the world, leaving beauty behind you wherever you've been?" He twisted himself round to lie at full length and look up at her. "What delightful things you say," he said. "I wish I could think you mean them." "Mean them?" she exclaimed, flushing again. "Do you suppose I'd waste the precious minutes saying things I don't mean? I haven't talked to anyone really for years, not to anyone who answered back. And now it's you. Why, it's too wonderful, as though I'd waste a second of it. You're the queerest, most surprising thing to find here on the edge of the world," he said, gazing up at her. "And there's the sun just got at your hair through the trees. Are you always full of molten enthusiasms for people?" "Only for you." "But what am I to say to these repeated paintings?" he cried. "You got into my imagination that day I met you, and you've been in it ever since. I was in the stupidest state of dull giving in. You pulled me out." He stared at her, his chin on his hand. "Imagine me pulling anybody out of anything," he said. "Generally I pull them in." "It's true I've had relapses," she said. 5 relapses." "5?" She nodded. "5 since then. But here I am, seething, as you call it, and it's you who started me, and I believe I shall go on now doing it uninterruptedly for ever." Ingram put out his hand with a quick movement, as though he were going to touch the edge of her dress. "Teach me how to seethe," he said. "That's rather like asking a worm to give lessons in twinkling to a star." "Wonderful," he said softly, after a little pause, "to lie here having sweet things said to one. Why didn't I find you before? I've been being bored at the Glambecks for a whole frightful week." "Oh, have you been there a week already?" she asked anxiously. "Then you'll go away soon?" "I was going to morrow." "That's like last time. You were just going when I met you." "But now I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay and paint you." She jumped. "Oh!" she exclaimed, awestruck. "Oh, paint you and paint you and paint you," said Ingram, "and see if I can catch some of your happiness for myself. Get at your secret. Find out where it all comes from. But it comes from you. At this moment it's all you." "It doesn't. It's inside you, and I want to get as much of it as I can. I'm dusty and hot and sick of everything. I'll come and stay near you and paint you, and you shall make me clean and cool again." "The stuff you talk," she said, leaning forward, her face full of laughter. "As though I could do anything for you. You're really making fun of me the whole time. But I don't care. I don't care about anything so long as you won't go away. You needn't be afraid I'm going away. I'm going to have a bath of remoteness and peace. I'll chuck the Glambecks and get a room in your village. I'll come every day and paint you. You're like a little golden leaf, a beech leaf in autumn, blown suddenly from God knows where across my path. Now it's you making me purr," she said. "You're like everything that's clear and bright and cool and fresh." "Oh," murmured Ingeborg, radiant. "And I haven't even got a tail to wag. Already, after only 10 minutes of you, I feel as if I were eating cold, fresh, very crisp lettuce. That's not nearly so nice. I don't think I like being lettuce. I don't care. You are. And I'm going to paint you. I'm going to paint your soul. Tell me some addresses for lodgings," he said, snatching up a sheet of paper and a pencil. "There aren't any." "Then I must stay at your vicarage." "You'll have to sleep with Robert then." "What? Who is Robert?" "My husband." "Oh, yes. But how absurd that sounds." "What does?" "You're having a husband." "I don't see how you can help having a husband if you're a wife." "No, it's inevitable. But it's quaint that you should be anybody's wife, let alone a pastor's, here in Kökensee." She got up impulsively. "Come and see him," she said. "You wouldn't last time. Come now, let me make tea for you. Let me have the pride of making tea for you." "But not this minute," he begged, as she stood over him, holding out her hand to pull him up. "Yes, yes. He's in now. He'll be out in his fields later. He'll be frightfully pleased. We'll tell him about the picture. Oh, but you did mean it, didn't you?" she added, suddenly anxious. He got up reluctantly and grumbling. "I don't want to see Robert." "Why should I see Robert? I don't believe I'm going to like Robert," he muttered, looking down at her from what seemed an immense height. "Of course I mean it about the picture," he added in a different voice, quick and interested. "It'll be a companion portrait to your sister's." He laughed. "That would really be very amusing," he said, stooping down and neatly putting his scattered things together. Ingeborg flushed. "But that's rather cruel fun, isn't it, that you're making of me now?" she murmured. "What?" he asked, straightening himself to look at her. The light had gone out of her face. "What? Why, didn't I tell you my picture of you is to be the portrait of a spirit?" He pounced on his things and gathered them up in his arms. "Come along," he said impatiently, "and be intelligent. Let me beg you to be intelligent. Come along. I suppose I'm to go in the punt. What's in it? Books by the dozen. What's this? Eucken? Keats? Pragmatism? Oh Lord!" "Why oh Lord?" she asked, getting in and picking up the paddle while he gave the punt a vigorous shove off and jumped on to it as it went. She was radiant again. She was tingling with pride and joy. He really meant it about the picture. He hadn't made fun of her. On the contrary. "Why oh Lord?" she asked. "You said that, or something like it, last time because I didn't read." "Well, now I say it because you do," he said, crouching at the opposite end, watching her movements as she paddled. "But that doesn't seem to have much consistency, does it?" she said. "Hang consistency. I don't want you addled. And you'll get addled if you topple all these different stuffs into your little head together. But I'd rather be addled than empty. Nonsense. If I could I'd stop your doing anything that may alter you a hairbreadth from what you are at this moment." "To that," she remarked, suspending her paddle in mid-air, her face as sparkling as the shining drops that flashed from it, that she really was greatly enjoying herself, and they both laughed. Ingram waited in the parlour, where he stood taking in with attentive eyes the details of that neglected, almost snubbed little room, while Ingeborg went to the laboratory, so happy and proud that she forgot she was breaking rules, to fetch, as she said, Robert. Robert, however, would not be fetched. He looked up at her with a great reproach on her entrance, for, as invariably happened on the rare occasions when the tremendousness of what she had to say seemed to her to justify interrupting, he thought he had just arrived within reach after an infinite patient stalking of the coy, elusive heart of the problem. "Mr. Ingram is here," she said breathlessly. He gazed at her over his spectacles. "In the parlour," said Ingeborg. "He's come to tea. Isn't it wonderful? He's going to paint." "Who is here, Ingeborg?" "Mr. Ingram. Edward Ingram. Come and talk to him while I get tea." She had even forgotten to shut the door in her excitement, and a puff of wind from the open window picked up Herr Dremmel's papers and blew them into confusion. He endeavoured to catch them, and requested her in a tone of controlled irritation to shut the door. "Oh, how dreadful of me," she said, hastily doing it, but with gaiety. "I do not know." "Then," said Herr Dremmel, mastering his annoyance, "Mr. Ingram." "But, Robert, it's the Mr. Ingram. Edward Ingram, the greatest artist there is now, the great portrait painter. Berlin has—" "Is he a connection of your family's, Ingeborg?" "No, but he painted "Then it's not necessary for me to interrupt my afternoon on his behalf." And Herr Dremmel bent his head over his papers again. "But, Robert, he's great. He's very great." Herr Dremmel, with a wetted thumb, diligently rearranged his pages. "But why, I told him you'd love to see him. What am I to say to him if you don't come?" Herr Dremmel, his eye caught by a sentence he had written, was reading with a deep, enormous appetite. "Tea," said Ingeborg desperately. "There's tea. You always do come to tea. It'll be ready in a minute." He looked up at her, gathering her into his consciousness again. "Tea?" he said. But even as he said it his thoughts fell off to his problem, and without removing his eyes from hers he began carefully to consider a new aspect of it that in that instant had occurred to him. There was nothing for it but to go away, so she went. Chapter 28. Ingram's visit to the Glambecks had in any case been coming to an end the next day, when he was to have gone to Königsberg on his way to the Caucasus, a place he hoped might trick him by its novelty for at least a time out of boredom. And the Baron and Baroness were greatly surprised when he told them he was not going to the Caucasus but to Kökensee instead. With one voice they exclaimed, "Kökensee?" "To paint the pastor's wife's hair," said Ingram. The Baron and Baroness were silent. The explanation seemed to them beyond comment. Its disreputableness robbed them of speech. Herr Ingram, of course, an artist of renown. If he had not been of very great renown they could not have seen their way to admitting him on terms of equality into their circle. Might paint whosever hair he pleased. But Was there not some ecclesiastical law forbidding that the hair of one's pastor's wife should be painted? To have one's hair painted when one was a pastor's wife was hardly more respectable than having it dyed. People of family were painted in order to hand down their portrait to succeeding generations. But you had to have generations. You had to have scions. You had to have a noble stock for the scions to spring from, and the painting was entered into soberly, discreetly, advisedly, in the fear of God, for the delectation of children, not lightly or wantonly, not for effect, not, as Herr Ingram had added of Frau Pastor's hair, because any portion of one's person was strangely beautiful. Strangely beautiful? They looked at each other, and the Baroness raised her large and undulating white hands from her black lap for a moment, and let them drop on to it again, and the Baron slowly nodded his entire agreement. Ingram had found a room in the village inn at Kökensee, a place so sordid, so entirely impossible as the next habitation after theirs for one who had been their guest, that the Baron and Baroness were concerned for what their servants might think when they heard him direct their coachman in the presence of their butler and footman as he clambered nimbly into the dog-cart to take him to it. And the Baroness went in and wrote at once to her son Hildebrand in Berlin, who had introduced Ingram to Glambeck, and told him she did not intend permitting Herr Ingram to visit her again. "To please you," she wrote, "I did it. But how true it is that these artists can never rise beyond being artists. I have finished with outsiders, however clever. Give me gentlemen." She did not mention, she found she could not mention, the hair, and to the Baron that evening she expressed the hope that at least the picture would only be in water-colour. Water-colour, she felt, seemed somehow nearer the commandments than oils. It was impossible to paint a serious picture of Ingeborg in the dark little parlour at the parsonage, and as there was no other room at all that they could use, Ingram began a series of sketches of her out of doors, in the garden, in the punt, anywhere and everywhere. "I must get some idea of you," he said, perceiving that a reason for his coming every day had to be provided. "Later on I'll do the real picture in a proper studio." "I wonder how I'll get to a proper studio," smiled Ingeborg. "I've got a very good one in Venice. You must sit to me there, as though it were round the corner. But these are very wonderful," she said, taking up the sketches. "I wish I were really like that." "It's exactly you as you were at the moment." "Nonsense," she said, but she glowed. She knew it was not true, but she loved to believe he somehow, by some miracle, saw her so. The sketches were exquisite, little impressions of happy moments caught into immortality by a master. Hardly ever did he do more than her head and throat, and sometimes the delicate descent to her shoulder. The day she saw his idea of the back of her neck she flushed with pleasure. It was such a beautiful thing. "That's not me," she murmured. "Isn't it? I don't believe anybody has ever explained to you what you're like." "There wasn't any need to. I can see for myself. Apparently that's just what you can't do. It was high time I came." "Oh, but wasn't it?" she agreed earnestly. He thought her frankness, her unadorned way of saying what she felt, as refreshing and as surprising as being splashed with clear, cold, shining mountain water. He had never met anything feminine that was quite so near absolute simplicity. He might call her the most extravagantly flattering things, and she appreciated them. and savoured them with a kind of objective delight that interested him at first extraordinarily. Then it began to annoy him. "You're as unself-conscious," he told her one afternoon a little crossly, when he had been ransacking heaven and earth and most of the poets for images to compare her with, and she had sat immensely pleased and interested and urging him at intervals to go on, "as a choir boy. But what a nice, clean, soaped sort of thing to be like," she said, "and so much more alive than lettuces." "I wonder if you are alive," he said, staring at her. And she looked at him with her head on one side and told him that if she were not a bishop's daughter and a pastor's wife and a child of many prayers and trained from infancy to keep carefully within the limits of the allowable in female speech, she would reply to that, "You bet." "But that's only if I were vulgar that I'd say that," she explained. "Gentility is the sole barrier, I expect really, between me and excess." "You and excess? You little funny, cold watery, early morningly thing. One would as soon connect the dawn and the fields before sunrise and small birds and the greenest of green young leaves with excess." He was more near being quite happy during this first week than he could remember to have been since that period of pinafore in which the world is all mother and daisies. He was enjoying the interest of complete contrast, the freshness that lies about beginnings. From this remoteness, this queer, intimate German setting, he looked at his usual life as at something entirely foolish, hurried, noisy and tiresome. All those women, good heavens, all those women, who collected and coagulated about his path, what terrible things they seemed from here. Women he had painted, who rose up and reproached him because his idea of them and their idea were different. Women he had fallen in love with, or tried to persuade himself he had fallen in love with, or tried to hope he would presently be able to persuade himself he had fallen in love with. Women who had fallen in love with him and fluffed and flapped about him, monsters of soft enveloping suffocation. Women he had wronged, absurd word, women who had claims on him on him who belonged only to art and the universe. And there was his wife, good heavens, yes, his wife. From these distresses and irksomenesses, from a shouting world, from the crowds and popularity that pushed between him and the one thing that mattered, his work, from the horrors of home life, the horrors of society and vain repetitions of genialities, from all the people who talked about thought and art and the mind of the world, from jealousies, affections, praises, passions, excitement, boredom, he felt very safe at Kökensee. To be over there in the middle of the distracting emptiness of London was like having the sour dust of a neglected market-place blown into one's face. To be over here in Kökensee was to feel like a single goldfish in a bowl of clear water. Ingeborg was the clear water. Kökensee was the bowl. For a week he swam with delight in this new element. For a week he felt so good and innocent, exercising himself in its cool translucency, that almost did he seem a goldfish in a bib. Then Ingeborg began to annoy him, and she annoyed him for the precise reason that had till then charmed him, her curious resemblance to a boy. This frank affection, this unconcealed delight in his society, this ever ready excessive admiration, were arresting at first and amusing and delicious after the sham freshness, the tricks, the sham daring things of the women he had known. They were like a bath at the end of a hot night, like a country platform at the end of a stuffy railway journey, but you cannot sit in a bath all day or stay permanently on a platform. You do want to go on, you do want things to develop. Ingram was nettled by Ingeborg's apparent inability to develop. It was all very well, it was charming to be like a boy for a little while, but to persist in it was tiresome. Nothing he could say, nothing he could apply to her in the way of warm and varied epithet, brought the faintest trace of self-consciousness into her eyes. What can be done, he thought, with a woman who will not be self-conscious? She received his speeches with enthusiasm, she hailed them with delight and laughter, and what was particularly disconcerting, she answered back with equal warmth and with equal variety, sometimes, he suspected, annoyed at being outdone in epithet, with even more. To judge from her talk she almost made love to him. He would have supposed it was quite making love if he had not known, if he had not been so acutely aware that it was not. With a face of radiance and a voice of joy she would say suddenly that God had been very good to her, and when he asked in what way, would answer earnestly, "In sending you here." And then she would add in that peculiar sweet voice, she certainly had, thought Ingram, a peculiar sweet voice, a little husky, again a little like a choir boy's, but a choir boy with a slight sore throat, "I've missed you dreadfully all these years. I've been lonely for you." And the honesty of her, the honest sincerity of her eyes when she said these things. No choir boy older than 10 could look at one with quite such a straight simplicity. Every day punctually at 2 o'clock, by which time the daily convulsion of dinner and its washing up was over at the parsonage, he walked across from his inn, while Kökensie's mouths, behind curtains and round doors, guttered with excited commentary, telling himself as he gazed down the peaceful street that this was the emptiest, gossip-freest place in the world, to the Dremmel gate, and dodging the various rich puddles of the yard, passed round the corner of the house, along the lilac path beneath the laboratory windows, to where, at the end of the lime tree avenue, Ingeborg sat waiting. Then he would sketch her, or pretend to sketch her, according as the mood was on him, and they would talk. By the second day he knew all about her life since her marriage, her 6 children, they amazed and appalled him, her pursuit, started by him, of culture, her housekeeping, her pride in Robert's cleverness, her solitude, her thirst for some one to talk to. Persons like Ilse and Rosa, Frau Dremmel, Robertlet and Ditti became extraordinarily real to him. He made little drawings of them while she talked up the edge of his paper. And he also knew by the second day all about her life in Redchester, its filial ardours, its duties, its difficulties when it came to disentangling itself from the Bishop, and his paper sprawled up its other edge with tiny bishops and unattached expressive aprons. The one thing she concealed from him of the larger happenings of her life was Lucerne, but even that he knew after a week. "So you can do things," he said, looking at her with a new interest. "You can do real, live things." "Oh yes, if I'm properly goaded." "I wonder what you mean by properly goaded." "Well, I was goaded then, goaded by being kept in one place uninterruptedly for years. That's what is happening to you now." "Oh, but this is different. And I've been to Zoppot." "Zoppot." "Besides, you're here." "But I won't be here for ever." "Oh, but you'll be somewhere in the same world." "As though that were any good." "Of course it is. I shall read about you in the papers." "Nonsense," he said crossly, "the papers. And I shall curl up in your memory as if I were dead. You sometimes really are beyond words ridiculous." "I expect it's because I've had so little education," she said meekly. At tea time almost every day Herr Dremmel joined them in the garden, and the conversation became stately. The sketches were produced, and he made polite comments. He discussed art with Ingram, and Ingram discussed fertilizers with him, and as neither of them knew anything about the other's specialty, they discussed by force of intelligence. Ingeborg poured out the tea and listened, full of pride in them both. She thought how much they must be liking and admiring each other. Robert's sound sense, his quaint and often majestic English, his obviously notable scientific attainments must, she felt sure, deeply impress Ingram, and of course to see and speak to the great Ingram every day could not but give immense gratification to Robert, now that he had become aware of who he was. She sat between the two men in her old-fashioned, voluminous white frock, looking from one to the other with eager pride while they talked. She did not say anything herself out of respect for such a combination of brains, but she was all ears. She drank the words in. It was more mind-widening, she felt, even than the Clarion. Ingram hated tea time at the parsonage. Every day it was more of an effort to meet Herr Dremmel's ceremoniousness appropriately, and his scientific thirst for facts about art bored Ingram intolerably. He detested the large, soft creases of his clothes, and the way they buttoned and bulged between the buttonings. He disliked him for having sleeves and trousers that were too long. He shuddered at the thought of the 6 children. He did not want to hear about superphosphates, and resented having regularly every afternoon to pretend he did. And he did want, and this became a growing wish and a growing awkwardness, to make love to Herr Dremmel's wife. Herr Dremmel's large unconsciousness of such a possibility annoyed him, particularly his obliviousness to the attractiveness of Ingeborg. He would certainly deserve, thought Ingram, anything he got. It was scandalous not to take more care of a little thing like that. Every day at tea time he was enraged by this want of care in Herr Dremmel, and every day before and after tea he was engrossed, if abortive efforts to philander can be called so, in not taking care of her himself. "You see," said Ingeborg, when he commented on the immense personal absences and withdrawals of Herr Dremmel, "Robert is very great. He's wonderful, the things he does with just grains. And of course if one is going to achieve anything one has to give up every minute to it. Why, even when he loved me he usedn't to—" "Even when he loved you?" interrupted Ingram. "What, doesn't he now?" "Oh, yes, yes," she said quickly, flushing. "I meant, of course, he does. And besides, one always loves one's wife." "No, one doesn't." "Yes, one does." They left it at that. At the end of his second week in Kökensee, Ingram found himself increasing the number of his adjectives and images and comparisons, growing almost eagerly poetical, for the force of proximity and want of anyone else to talk to or to think about was beginning to work, and was becoming the one thing that seemed to him to matter, to get self-consciousness into her frank eyes, something besides or instead of that glow of admiring friendliness. He was now very much attracted and almost equally exasperated. She was after all a woman, and it was absurd, it was incredible that he, Ingram, with all these opportunities, should not be able to shake her out of her first position of just wonder at him as an artist and a celebrity. She was so warm and friendly and close in one sense, and so nowhere at all in another. So responsive, so quick, so ready to pile the sweetest honey of flattery and admiration on him, and so blank to the fact that, well, that there they were, he and she. And then she had a sense of fun that interrupted, a sense most admirable in a woman at any other time, but not when she is being made love to. Also she was very irrelevant. He could not fix her. She tumbled about mentally, and that hindered progress too. Not that he cared a straw for her mentality except in so far as its quality was a hindrance. It was that other part of her, her queer little soul, that interested him, her happiness and zest of life, and of course the graces and harmonies of her lines and colouring. "You know, I suppose," he said to her one evening as they walked slowly back along the path through the rye field, and the cool sense of the ended summer's day rose in their faces as they walked, "that I'd give 100 days of life in London or Paris for an hour of this atmosphere, this cleanness that there is about you. I don't think 100's much. I'd give them all to be with you, here, now, in the rye field. Isn't it wonderful this evening? Isn't it beautiful? Did you smell that?" She stopped and raised her nose selectingly. "Just that instant? That's convolvulus. You have such faith in my gods," he went on, when he could get her away from the convolvulus. "Such a bravery of belief, such a dear bravery of belief." "Well, but of course," she said, turning shining eyes on to him, "who wouldn't believe in your gods? Art, love of beauty." "But it isn't only art. My gods are all sweet things and all fine things," said Ingram, convinced at the moment that he had never done anything but worship gods of that particular flavour, so thoroughly was he being purged by the hyssop of life in cogency. "Oh," said Ingeborg, with an odd enthusiasm, "how wonderful it is that you should be exactly what you are. But it is clever of you," she added, with a little movement of her hands, smiling up at him, "to be exactly what you are." "And do you know what exactly you are? You're the open window in the prison house of my life." She held her breath a moment. "How very beautiful," she then said. "How very beautiful, and how kind you are to think of me like that. But why is it a prison house? You, of all people." "It isn't living, you see. It's existence in caricature over there. It's like dining perpetually with Madame Tussaud's waxworks, or anything else totally unreal and incredible. But I don't understand how a great artist, and you're like an open window, like the sky, like sweet air, like freedom, like secret light." "Oh," she murmured, deprecating but enchanted. "When I'm with you I feel an intolerable disgust for all the chatter and flatulence of that other life. And when I'm with you," she said, "I feel as if I were stuffed with with stars." He was silent a moment. Then, determined not to be outdone, he said, "When I'm with you I begin to feel like a star myself, as though you weren't always one. No, it's only you. Till I found you I was just an angry ball of mud. But a thirsty man in a stuffy room. But an emptiness, a wailing blank, an eviscerated thing." "A what?" asked Ingeborg, who had not heard that word before. "And you," he went on, "are the cool water that quenches me, the scent of roses come into the room, liquid light to my clay." She drew a deep breath. "It's wonderful, wonderful," she said, And it sounds so real somehow. Really, almost as though you meant it. Oh, I don't mind you making fun of me a bit, if only you'll go on saying lovely things like that." "Fun of you? Have you no idea then, positively no idea, how sweet you are?" He bent down and looked into her face. "With little kisses in each of your eyes," he said, scrutinizing them. Section 13